Everybody joining me on the show this week, kind of a tradition, I guess, here on all the different shows I've done. I am joined by Bill Bender from the Sporting News, senior writer over there, also president of the Football Writers Association of America. And Bill, I appreciate you coming on. I have had you on the week or a day or two after the national championship game, I think, every year since the Clemson-Alabama one when Clemson beat Alabama with Deshaun Watson. So I always appreciate you coming on to talk about the national championship game.
Oh, fun tradition for sure. And, the season's over, and you get that, a little bit of relief in some ways because it's been a long season and a lot of work. But then you start to, after about 48 hours, you're like, man, I better start thinking about what's next. And it was a lot of fun down at Atlanta. It was very cold down in Atlanta, but we had a fun time. We knocked out some good coverage there at Sporting News.
Yeah, I joked with somebody. Of course, I'm down here in Alabama, SEC country. I joked with somebody. I said, we got the snow this week that's normally for you guys up there. And the North or the Big Ten country got the national championship. So it's, a little opposite of what we're used to down here because trust me, I'm down here in Dothan, Alabama. We've had a record snowfall down here. We're not used to this kind of stuff. But, yeah, I'm sure you got that in Atlanta as well. How was the overall experience, just kind of like the build-up for the days or when you did get there in Atlanta just for the game overall?
Oh, there's no question. It was a good experience. It was, a lot of Notre Dame fans down there, a lot of Ohio State fans down there. For me personally, I'm a Catholic school kid from Central Ohio, so it was fun to see that build up and how many Irish fans were down there. Maybe it was the hotel I was staying at, but it seemed like there was more Notre Dame fans. Then I got to the stadium and was reminded that Ohio State has one of the best traveling fan bases in the country, had probably 65% of the stadium. And what a 4-game rampage they went on. It was impressive. And the Buckeyes get to hold up the national championship and set a standard for the rest of college football. I mean, in terms of how we do it in the 12-team era.
Yeah, I mean, because, they weren't one of the teams with that first round bye. I mean, that went to Oregon because they were the Big Ten champion just on that run, going 14-2, too, playing a 16 game, as you said, setting that standard. Now we kind of it's going to look different every year, but you do have an idea now going forward. Okay, this is kind of how it could look like. And just overall, their run, I mean, just the dominant of Tennessee, I think going into that first round game, a lot of people kind of had some questions about obviously Ohio State coming off the Michigan game and then just pure out dominating Oregon in the first half. And then, coming away against Texas, I mean, who was the flag bearer of the SEC at that point, and then holding on against Notre Dame. Just how do you best summarize what this Ohio State team was this year winning this national championship?
Roller coaster, when you don't win a Big Ten championship and you end up losing to your rival. I mean, we've seen that before. I mean, Texas made the playoff despite losing to Oklahoma last year. Alabama had lost to Auburn, was at a 17. They still win the national title. But, yeah, it was stunning. I don't think if you would ask too many people up here in Central Ohio on December 1st, or hey, you're going to win the national title, they would have laughed in your face. But they really put it together at the right time. They beat 6 of the top 8 teams in the college football playoff rankings. The only one they didn't beat was Georgia. So, and Notre Dame took care of that for them. So it was an impressive run, and I think that's what, as we look at this down the line, it will be that run and how many NFL guys are on that team, because they're going to have a bunch.
Yeah, it's kind of wild when you're thinking about it. Ohio State has won the first year of the format of the playoff both times. The first 14 playoff, they were the champions, and now here in the 12-team playoffs. So that's also something they can hang their hat on, historically.
Well, and if you talk to any Ohio State fan, they'll probably tell you they should have won the first year of the BCS too. They had a loaded team that year, or the year Tennessee won it. They got beat by Michigan State and Nick Saban at Ohio Stadium when Nick Saban was at Michigan State. So that was, it was excellent. And the team put it together at the right time. And for me, I mean, this is not breaking news, but I'm kind of happy for Ryan Day. Getting silence the critics and go on that run, and for what he went through after that Michigan game. I mean, yeah, he deserves to be celebrated.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there was talk if they lose to Tennessee in that first-round playoff game, could he be fired? And, I mean, it's a great record he has. I mean, still, just the pressure going in to the, like you said, after Michigan game. And the way the championship game went, and, of course, that opening drive for Notre Dame, I mean, it was almost 10 minutes worth of time they took off the clock, 18 plays, 75 yards. I mean, Riley Leonard, 9 rushes in that series for 34 yards. You kind of had to feel like, especially when you saw how he was reacting to how tired or injured or just how, spent he was on that first drive. So, okay, can they keep this up? But just, as you're watching, you're there in person, you're seeing that opening drive by Notre Dame and they go up 7-0. What was kind of like going through your mind on that series and what we could see out of the game?
That they probably weren't going to be able to run Riley Leonard 40 times. I mean, that was my initial thought. It was an impressive way, and I knew that on some level they were going to try to play keep away, and they did. It's a long drive to start the game and a long, effective drive to start the game. And but Ohio State adjusted, and their offense was the story. When you score touchdowns on your first 4 possessions, when you score 31 points on your first 5 possessions in the game, and really put the game away, and the ratings and our page views show that about that time people started turning off because they knew it was over. And Notre Dame fought back, but once they got up 31-7, you realize that it would be incredibly difficult for Ohio State to mess this up.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. Watching TV, I was kind of like watching it, and it was 31-7. I was like, okay, let me just hang here for a little bit more before I decide I'm going to catch the rest of it on DVR the next morning and go on to bed, get ready for work the next day. But still, in the Notre Dame side of things, just kind of the story of this team losing to Northern Illinois early in the year, and the dominance. I mean, they were a dominant team with going up against their schedule for most of the year. Beating Georgia, I know, some Georgia fans say, we didn't have Carson Beck. Still, that was really loaded Georgia team. But just the run and then beating Penn State the way they did, down 10-0 early and fought back, and then we saw them fight back here. I asked this question about Ohio State. Still, we always kind of ignore the team that did lose the championship game, but still getting there is an accomplishment. How would you summarize this Notre Dame team? Just the fight this team had all year.
Oh, I mean, great building block. I think after that loss, Marcus Freeman rallied that team together. Their defense was really good, which probably the most surprising part to me in that title game was that their defense just didn't really have an answer for Ohio State, and that tells you how good Ohio State was. Notre Dame was the number 2 scoring defense in the country. So I think that's something that stood out to me. But Marcus Freeman has them back on the national stage. Like, you can't say Notre Dame's overrated or Notre Dame's this or Notre Dame's that. They went through Georgia. They went through Penn State. They won those games, and they won them in an impressive fashion. And I think they're only going to get better under Marcus. He'll continue to develop players, and the quarterback position will be interesting next year, whether it will be C.J. Carr or Steve Angeli. And I think their schedule is tough in September. They play Miami early, right up to go. But they're back in the limelight, and they deserve it. And Marcus Freeman has made them likable in some ways. That was one of the themes going into the game.
Yeah, I know for a long time, I think nationally, if you weren't, a Notre Dame fan or supporter or involved with the university or school, you're like, I don't want Notre Dame to win. But they actually were like they were the underdog in the game. I think a lot of people were outside of Ohio were probably rooting for Notre Dame. Just like you said, he made them likable, which may be a narrative on Brian Kelly too. But we'll save that for a different conversation,
right,
at a different time. And Jeremiah Smith, I mean, him and Will Howard had a great game as well. I think a lot of people going to the year kind of wondered about him. Is he a championship quarterback? Obviously, he showed that. But you can't guard Jeremiah Smith one-on-one, and Notre Dame found out on that big 3rd and 11 when we mentioned Notre Dame made that rally. Big play by them. They went all out, man-to-man coverage. You can't do that. But just what's been your thoughts on the growth as Jeremiah Smith as receiver and just knowing that he's here in college football for a couple more years before he can head to the National Football League?
Yeah, I mean, that's good for us in college football. Very enjoyable player. I had a great freshman year. And when you start hearing the conversation, no, he should go to the NFL right away as a 19-year-old, that speaks to the talent. I don't think that'll happen. I mean, I guess you have some interesting, NIL opportunities with that if you're worth that much, but I don't see him going to the NFL early. It's just not something I think he'll do. But Yeah, what a catch. What first touchdown was a nice play design, too. I mean, Chip Kelly really flexed in this game and showed some creativity, and they were awesome. And Jeremiah Smith's an awesome player. You mentioned Will Howard. I thought, he was really the story of the game in a lot of ways because, the ball didn't really hit the turf. He hit its first 13 passes. What are you going to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was on point, and you got to think. I kind of wonder. We talk about the NFL draft coming up. I mean, obviously that game probably not going to jump him to the first round, but still, I wonder through this playoff run how much his stock has gone up.
Oh, I'm sure a lot. I mean, I don't know if he'll go in the first round, but he's definitely a day two guy, and the size is there, the mobility is there. I heard some comparisons to Mac Jones, but I mean, I don't know, man. I think Will Howard a little more size. Now the arm, he does turn the ball over a little bit, but I mean, it depends on how you manage those turnovers, and do you make so many? Are they game devastating turnovers? He had a rough game against Michigan, but in that 4-game playoff run, it was lights out all the way through, and you got to respect that. And I think that'll be something that carries over into the draft process with Will Howard. There's no doubt.
So, of course, the first year 12-team playoff, and, this is what we like to do. We did it after the 14 playoff. We have to analyze it. Should there be tweaks? Should there be changes? Is there anything you would like to see different the way it's formatted, or are you just fine with the way we have it?
Well, I think it needs to be tweaked, certainly, and they probably will. I think you need to seed the team. The two that I have, seed the teams properly. Seed them how they're ranked. And some people would say, I think you should. That will create better matchups and less complaints about the early rounds. And then after that, I think you just got to compress the calendar a little bit. 7 weeks is a long playoff. Now, I don't know that coaches feel that way, but the writers do. And I think the public does because the ratings on the championship game were not great. And I think part of the reason is, you had some of that's regional. I don't know that people in the South cared about Notre Dame, Ohio State that much, especially when it got out of hand. But, 7 weeks, a long time, keep people's attention, especially when the NFL playoff is going on.
Yeah, that's kind of the interesting thing. I saw a thing where they would maybe collaborate. We'll see how that always sounds like more the NFL's telling you what we're going to do. You work around it, but we'll see how that goes. You mentioned the South, and I got to ask you, real quick before we get off here. There seems to be now 2 straight years there's not an SEC team in the national championship game. Down here in the South, that is it is worrisome, obviously for people down here in the SEC country. Do you see a decline in the SEC, or do you just see the NIL, the transfer portal thing having an impact, and now just there's more talent spread out, and the SEC's not able to keep all that same talent? Or how do you see all that with the SEC?
Well, I mean, Georgia, they have the Carson Beck injury. You never know where that would have went. So I don't know. I do know that it's the first time in a long time where Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Notre Dame are all right. That's my point with the whole thing. It's like, yeah, the Big Ten, does it mean, they haven't gone back-to-back in my lifetime, ever. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think that's an interesting trend, no doubt. But does it mean the SEC's dead? No. You still have Georgia. You look at our top 10 for next year, we still have more SEC teams in the top 10, maybe right there with the Big Ten, and then more SEC teams in the top 25 than any other conference. I just think they had an error of two things. I think they had a little bit of parity. They didn't have a dominant team, and they didn't really have a superstar player. They didn't have a guy finish top 10 in the Heisman. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's like, where's that star player that can lead a national championship run? And, maybe they've got a couple candidates for that next year, probably starting with Lenora Sellers, if we're honest.
Yeah. A lot of people were high on South Carolina definitely toward the end of the year. And just, as we close off-season storylines, in the last couple of years it's been NIL, transfer portal. Last year a lot of people saying, how's this 12-team playoff going to work? For you, what's the big off-season storyline for college football? There's a lot. I think Arch Manning and the build-up with Texas and,
they play Ohio State in the opener. That's one. Bill Belichick will be very interesting at North Carolina. I mean, that was a huge hire and will draw a ton of interest to the sport, much like, I don't know if it'll be quite as big as Deion, but it'll be close. I mean, Bill Belichick won 6 Super Bowls. Let's go. So I think that will be a big one. And then, like you mentioned, the SEC and the Big Ten power struggle, these two conferences that have, been combined for 7 of the 12 playoff spots and really have more influence over the sport than anyone else. How does that materialize in 2025?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, but really there's no off-season in the sport, Bill. We all know that. There's going to be plenty to talk about between now and when spring practices start, and then between there and media days, and when the season gets started next year. So it's just the beginning of the quote-unquote off-season. But I appreciate you coming on. I always enjoy having you on, especially when you come on after the national championship game to kind of talk about it, wrap up the college football season. And, Bill, if the listeners, viewers out there want to check out, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm at Bill Bender 92 at sportingnews.com, and we'll have plenty of that off-season content. We have our way too early top 25 up. I took a look at all the top 25 across the major sites, and we have several other things coming over the next few weeks. So you'll have to check it out. It's going to be a lot of fun, and like you said, August 30th will be here before we know it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're counting down the days already. But anyways, Bill, appreciate the time, and I look forward when we get to do this again.
Hey, no problem, Phil. Thanks for having me on.